But we talked about challenges, we've talked about urgency, and we talked about taking action. I think you probably heard King Charles. I also feel strange saying that, King Charles. Yeah. But at COP28, talking about, we've had a lot of words, and at COP28, there's even more words. There's more people saying more things. There's even more words. And the idea that, the current and next generations, they won't care about what we said or how good our intentions were. They'll care about what we did and what we failed to do. And so this idea of turning whatever we learned, whatever insights, whatever enlightenment came today into action tomorrow, again, when all of you are going to be faced with a full in tray and a lot of things to do. What can we do differently? So what we do know is that there's lots of help out there. Everybody wants you to win. And so we're going to talk about available resources from greening healthcare. So the idea of making use of available resources, you don't have to reinvent a whole bunch of things. There's information out there already. It's available to you. It's in the public domain. And organizing around the resources, the capabilities that are out there that are looking to help. So let's kind of run through that. Microphone to George over here. Here we go. There. So Enbridge Gas, and really interested Craig sooner rather than later to talk to Manitoba Hydro and others about resources available. And we know that the utilities in New York have mandates, and we know that the utility companies in the United Kingdom have mandates, and they have to deliver savings, and they're willing and ready to help you. So, George, can you give us a bit of an update on what you guys are around, especially around decarbonization? It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does. Thank you, Ian, and thank you to the organizing committee at Greening Healthcare for the opportunity to discuss some of the work that we're doing on energy transition. My name is George Hansis. I'm here with Adam Trella and Julian Kazan, who've just stepped away, who serve the institutional market. So I'll start at a corporate level, Ian. Our sustainability goal is to achieve net zero by 2050 and to reduce our energy intensity in our operations at Enbridge by 35% by 2030 in comparison to our 2018 baseline. But also, Enbridge is supporting the transition by supporting clean energy technologies like CNG, compressed natural gas, for fleets and heavy transport that can't practically be electrified. RNG, or renewable natural gas, through partnerships and collaboration and investments that directly increase the supply of renewable natural gas, as well as hydrogen blending. So Enbridge Gas is North America's first utility-scale power-to-gas plant facility located right here in Markham, which takes excess electricity off the grid in surplus and converts it to clean hydrogen and blends it back into our existing expansive pipeline network, greening our pipeline. That could economically be delivered to our customers. So drilling down a little bit further into the energy conservation pillar, which I think we all know that it is the first and most meaningful step that anyone can take towards energy transition, and that is energy conservation. Essentially evaluating, ensuring that every unit of energy spent is truly required. So this is where our commercial demand side management and commercial program delivery really excels. It's helping with the identification of programs, the audits, the feasibility studies, the true consultative work that you all do today and collaborate together with. And I've heard some people talk about the technical support is leveraging, our internal resources to help quantify and identify what those opportunities might be. But also the programs that we have in terms of, taking those opportunities, and giving them some legs so that they can get some traction. So the incentives, the monetary and the funding that goes alongside with, making sure that those opportunities become reality and then we can see those gas savings. And what I'm talking about there is, our audit incentive programs, our custom program, and our prescriptive program. And just a little teaser for 2024, our incentive rates and audit offers will be increasing. So my only takeaway, and it's unfortunate they're not here, was to point you to Adam and to Julian, who are your institutional advisors. They cover the entire province. Adam covers the western part, and Julian covers the eastern part. And so if there is an energy conservation measure for a hospital, they've seen it, it's gone through their desk, and they can help you with anything that's required to make sure that that project goes forward. So if you haven't met Adam and Julian, I'll point them out once they return back to the room. Say hello and introduce yourselves. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, George. Well, I know they'll be back as soon as the bar opens. So, and I think if you want a working example of just how effective Julian's been with Southlake, he's been an integral part of the team. He made the economics work. He helped make the business case. So again, there's resources there to help, and Enbridge is a big part of that. Let's talk. Michael, are you picking this one up? So where's the microphone to Michael? Right in front of it. There we go. Tell me when to change the slides. I'm quite obedient.
Hi, my name is Michael. I am from the IESO, responsible for capability building, so all of our training and support resources. Today, I'm just going to provide a few updates on our programs. Should I keep this down? So for the retrofit program, most of our non-lighting measures, as of October 30th, they increased the incentive. So most of them doubled, and a few of them increased threefold. The last day to apply for lighting projects in the retrofit program is going to be December 17th. And as of December 18th, most of them are moving to the instant discount program. This program is a midstream program. So in this program, most of the incentives are paid directly to the distributors. That way we have a point of sale discount. So whenever you want to get your lighting with certain distributors, the incentive is already applied in it. We have the SCM program and the EBCX programs, which launched this year. The SCM program, it offers a 2-year cohort-based learning model. I think last month, the healthcare cohort launched, although we're still taking applications. So if you want to join the healthcare, or in 2024, we're going to have a mix of various organizations in various sectors. And both the SCM and the EBCX program still offer pay for performance incentives. In the EBCX program, there's also financial incentives to hire a commissioning provider. We also have our capability building program, so that's pretty much my specialty. And we deliver various webinars, coaching, workshops, one-on-one coaching, cohorts, as well as a few asynchronous learning resources, so guides, case studies, fact sheets, things like that. We also offer 50% incentives for a few training courses. And for Enbridge customers, we do have a partnership where you get up to 75% for some courses. We recently launched a training and support page on the Save on Energy website. So if you're looking for training opportunities or those resources, you can find them. And for updates on all of our programs, I recommend you look at our Save on Energy website, or you can talk to me at any point in time. Thank you.
That's great, Michael. And Michael, George, are you going to be staying around for a little bit after this?
Yeah, I should be here.
So see who you're looking at, connect with them, because these resources are worthwhile. And if you remember back when we showed the gap, we should be going that way, we're going that way. The idea that the Enbridge new framework coming up, the ISO new suite of programs, they're all going to become increasingly aggressive and increasingly valuable with higher targets. And this is the time to take advantage. And Hero of the Day award goes to Valerie Bennett, who was flying back yesterday, struggling through jet lag, and going to share with us the latest from the Government of Canada.
Thanks very much, Ian, and lovely to be here. As Ian said, my name is Valerie Bennett. I work at the Office of Energy Efficiency within Natural Resources Canada, and I'm joined by my colleague, Miriam Fatima, who's attending as well. So earlier, Dr. Bellin mentioned the idea of climate being everyone's file. I wanted to mention the federal government's emission reductions plan, which was released in 2022 and is a guiding document for all the different departments. It was developed by the Environment and Climate Change Canada, and it's how we're measuring our progress. It's aiming towards a 40% reduction in emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. So all the programs and policy that I'll be speaking to are underneath that overall overarching policy. So the first one is the Low Carbon Economy Fund. So this is actually a fund that pre-existed the emission reductions plan, but it was enhanced and expanded. There are 4 different streams. You can see highlighted the Challenge Fund, which is the one that I wanted to mention. It is currently open and seeking projects. So it's eligible project expenditures are included, and there's some funding included there. There's also a fund specifically aimed at Indigenous communities and governments and organizations that's also open for funding. There are 2 other streams aimed at provinces and territories and at capacity building specifically that are not currently open for calls. I also wanted to mention, and there's some additional key dates in there, and I recommend you check out the website for some more details there. I also wanted to mention a couple of programs from Natural Resources Canada within the Office of Energy Efficiency. Someone mentioned earlier, and I think it was you, that the government likes accelerators, so I'm going to mention 2. These are both aimed at buildings. The first is Deep Retrofit Accelerator Initiative, which is aimed at non-capital related funding for deep retrofits, and that's for existing commercial buildings, and hospitals and healthcare facilities are included within that, as well as the Codes Accelerator Fund, which is, as you can tell by the name, more focused on new buildings. I will note that both of those programs are only open for Indigenous applications at this point, so governments, organizations, and communities. But I keep an eye out for those, because the last policy that I wanted to mention was the Canada Green Building Strategy. It is currently under development, but it will be our guiding strategy for all buildings, so residential, commercial, and institutional. And we're expecting that to be released probably in the spring, and will include different tools to keep us progressing towards our objectives for buildings. And I will try to stick around a little bit. As Ian mentioned, I'm a little bit jet lagged, so I may not stay too long, but please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Happy to connect you to my colleagues that are working in the specific areas that you have. We've got a lot of opportunity for partnerships, as was discussed on the panels, and really curious and excited to hear your ideas about that. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Valerie. As Cliff has been nagging, because Cliff is known to nag every now and again, you got to have a plan. No matter how much time you've got, no matter you need a plan. Like, things are going to be happening really fast, and the ability to fold in what Enbridge, the ISO, federal government can do. Planning is essential. There's going to be so much change again over the next 7 years we go through. Just want to remind, again, shameless plug for Greening Healthcare. I just want to remind you of the resources that are available to you. You can see there's a quasi-computer screen there. greeninghc.com is there. There's a ton of resources out there that you can focus on and just run through how to categorize those. Reminding you from the morning that the 3 pillars Greening Healthcare is focused on: efficiency of existing hospitals, new hospital performance, getting them right the first time, and decarbonizing all hospitals on a go-forward basis. The content around there on energy efficiency, and again, just go to the website, it's all there. But there's a whole series of webinars where you'll find this slide deck today will go up there. But slide decks going back around all manner, from lighting to ventilation to OR, greening the operating room. There's real solid content there, including the kind of panel discussions you've heard today. There are publications which are designed to be best practice guides. So if you have a lighting retrofit project coming up and you don't pull off the LED lighting conversions guide, it's a very different way developed with industry and to hospitals to approach this, to get better outcomes in terms of electrical savings at arguably less cost. So using data logging as opposed to simply visual observations. We've got boiler plant design. We've got all kinds of work around that. And in particular, we've got the set of checklists is all there. The boiler plant checklist at the top, that is the one we developed with Thermogenics and applied to South Lake. You'd have seen that at the summer workshop. But we got checklists with just about everything, and people tell us it's the most convenient way to go through. You can go through, here are the 15 things I should have done. I can check off the 10 I did, and it just surfaces the 5 that are left to be done. So checklists are there. They've been developed over multiple years. They've been tested with a whole bunch of different people. As far as new hospitals are concerned, on the publications, I showed you the cover of that, the performance metrics for highly efficient. That is the system level metrics, how much lighting and so on comes out. Any hospitals under development right now where the project team is not referring to that guide to calibrate the energy models will have similar issues, I would suggest, to ones we've had with energy models over the past several years. Energy models are absolutely necessary and they need to be calibrated. They need to be right. But all of this is there for teams working on new hospitals. Please take a look. Take 15 minutes to see what's there and see what's useful to you. And any questions, any comments, Michael's available. Low carbon plants, we've done a lot of work. You saw the kind of high level, what the old plant looks like, what the new plant looks like. We've done work with that around building condition assessments, how to do those differently. So you're looking at low carbon alternatives as opposed to simply like for like replacements, but a series of prior webinars that explored with panels and industry, how are we going to get from here to there? How are we going to get from where we are today to low carbon within a manageable period of time? So we got outside organizations and we've got greening healthcare resources. They're there to help you, and you need to have a plan and take advantage of what's already known, because there's a real assembly and compilation of experience and knowledge there that will help, I'd argue, everybody in the room. We talked about planning. You've got to have an energy plan, and I like the idea you've got to have an investment plan. If your hospital buys into the idea that, yeah, we'll make savings and we'll recycle those until we get to our energy target, that's kind of cool. But planning is everything. In Ontario, we've got the ECDM plans coming up, but Manitoba, New York, British Columbia, everywhere, you've got to have a plan. So planning our way to 2029, 2030 is good. These are the guidelines we've already put out there in prior webinars. So again, no apologies for the repetition, but whether you're doing your own plans, whether you're hiring a consultant to do the plans, we would argue this time the plans have to work. Like previously, in some cases, we were checking the box. I don't want the Ministry of Energy calling my CEO and telling us we're delinquent. These times, 24 to 29, that takes us up to 2030. You've got to look harder at the ability to implement the plan, not just write down a shopping list of things we can do and what the payback might be. So it's all, and we'll talk a bit more about that. Looking back over the past 5 years, you set goals. In Ontario, you set goals 5 years ago. Did you meet them? If you didn't meet them, what went wrong? And how can you factor that into what you're going to do this time around? Who's going to be involved? What are the lessons learned? What are the organizational factors that may have got in the way, including financing? We heard a lot about that today. So starting point is looking back over the last 5 years and saying, what could we learn? And then folding that into the next 5 years. This is one last visualization I want to share with you if you haven't seen this before. This is looking at year-on-year savings. And this comes back to the original alarming picture that we're going in the wrong direction. If we look at the middle chart there, that's electricity use by all Ontario hospitals. Some of the data weren't clean enough to use, but all Ontario hospitals that are reported under the BPS system, where the top half of the tornado diagram is all those that made savings. And man, that should give us real hope and encouragement. Look at how many say savings, sometimes as much as 20% of prior year electricity. This is in 1 year, having adjusted for weather differences and any other variability in there. So the top part of that chart is what gives us hope. The bottom part of that chart is the reality that close to half of the hospitals in Ontario, same in every other jurisdiction we've looked at, California, New York, wherever, almost half of them have offsetting increases. And we've spoken to so many of these hospitals, the majority are unaware of the fact the energy is going up. You don't have good enough information reporting systems to know what's happening. So electricity, we wind up a net minus 0.1%, break even. Thermal energy, we get a net 0.1%, but look how many hospitals are making savings. Some of them are you, and some of them, some are not. The bottom part of that, again, pretty much offsets all the gains that we're making. And once again, the hospitals generally are unaware that they're going in the wrong direction. So better information systems, better reporting systems are fundamental. This idea of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. The reason, so we've got growing amount of space, which is the 1% creeping, increase. But the reality is we're not managing energy use in hospitals. This is hundreds of hospitals, as well as we should be. The gains that we're making are being offset by increases in other areas. And as I've been saying all day, if you don't know where you are on these charts, if you don't know which hospital is yours, the information is available. We're happy to share it with you. You need to know where you stand and deal with this. And this needs to be part of your ECDM plan going forward. Like, how are we going to deal with those increases on a go-forward basis? The knowing where you stand, what's your benchmark ranking? Once again, if you don't know where you are on this chart, we can tell you. And you need to know because it's the starting point for your plan, right? And this is something you can communicate with your organization. We would argue it's not, it doesn't advantage us any. The greening healthcare energy target that's set for every hospital in the program and is set for every hospital in the province is a pretty darn good place to start. In other words, if you can just get to be as good as the top quartile, it's not massively ambitious, but that will give us that 30% overall emissions reduction. What a massive kind of step forward. But knowing where you stand, setting the right target, knowing your savings potential, that's the business case for action. That's what you're going to share with your executive. And that's the investment plan that Cliff was talking about earlier. I want to emphasize this to you, the what to do. ECDM plans historically have been a shopping list of all the things you could do, a rough estimate of what it might cost and what the payback might be. But none of it gets done. Most of the plans that we look at, very little of what was planned in 2019 actually happened. The 2 parts of the plan need to be the energy efficiency improvements, and that's a pretty good shopping list if you cover all of those, which ones apply. But low carbon capital planning has to be part of this. So what does that look like? And again, there's nothing surprising within that. But as we talked about earlier, this won't be the last time you see this particular chart. The big deal is how to get it done. Do you have executive support? Do you have board support? Is the board aware of what you're trying to do? Do you have the time, the resources, the funding that you need to get things done? Is everybody on the same page within the organization? And do you know what to do? If you have all those things lined up, do you know what to do when it comes? So we talked about best practice guides. They're on the Greening Healthcare website. Go find them. But this is where I can't think of a case it's not the case that this is where all of the plans that didn't go well in 2019, this is where they failed. Not that people didn't know what to do, but organizationally they couldn't pull it off. They couldn't get it together. They couldn't find the time. They couldn't get the commitment. They couldn't get the budget. They couldn't get the staff to not override things. So this idea of focusing on how to do it, the hard part, more than on what to do, which is actually the relatively easy part. You know what to do. How to get it done is different in every hospital, and that's where to focus the attention. So planning matters. You need to have a plan. Next 7 years is going to be a lot of change, and your plan will allow you to navigate that change. So that's the second piece. You got resources available. There's ways of planning that can make sure that the plan works this time. The idea of working together. So again, shameless plug for greening healthcare. Collaborative program, everybody works together. We network, we bring, we find best practices, we use data to track savings, we recognize top performance. We run data-driven research, which is the kind of guides that you saw on the previous list of resources. That's resources. Cohort projects are getting a group of hospitals to work with a group of industry to fill in gaps in knowledge that nobody has right now. So the idea, let's not reinvent any wheels, let's work together on solving some of these issues. If you haven't met my colleague Heather at the back there, if you've encountered Heather, this is the conversation she has with hospitals. What do you get when you take part? Thanks, Heather, there you are. So again, this will be on the slide deck. You can find this anytime you wish. The concept of greening healthcare is somewhere between networking and managing data and managing knowledge, and the intersect between those things is the work that greening healthcare does to help you identify the right project. So this is the construct. This is the big idea. This is what we're always trying to fill. We got a lot of plans for the new year, a significant part of which has been helped by, we have new industry members, and thanks to those who are here, who absolutely help fund the continuation expansion of this work. We have federal funding that we're working through contribution agreements with both Environment Canada and NRCan. We've got with the ISO, Strategic Energy Management cohort project, where we intend to find 10 we've got a top 20 list of the biggest greenhouse gas emissions reduction potential hospitals in Ontario. And ECM, the ISO is funding some research work to hold hands with those hospitals for a period of time to figure out where are the opportunities, help them get implemented, and so on. And what we learn from that will translate into a guide that will be available to all hospitals to do that work. We've beefed up implementation support. We have another engineering coming on stream, so that when you phone in with questions or issues or barriers that are getting in the way of implementation of improvements, that the support will be there, that we can provide, again, a higher level support than we have in the past. And we're planning new working groups. And one of those that was talked about, we see this, so we're having the conversation with Cliff and John immediately after the last panel around, hopefully everybody's got something out of today, something useful, something kind of thought-provoking, but how do we organize for success going forward? Like what happens tomorrow and the next day and the next week? And the idea of organizing for success is to bring groups of interested parties together. I think, Cliff, you were suggesting sustainability plans, or hospitals all over the province are developing sustainability plans. Why don't we look at them all, compare them, and develop a standard template that everybody can use, and then make their sustainability plan, pick up the best of what's been done before, and tailor it, customize it to your particular hospital, and so on. So we're planning working groups. All of these we'll be reaching out to you for, saying this is what we have in mind, who's interested. If nobody's interested, we're okay with that. There's so many things to be done. But if they are interested, if we can get critical mass in terms of support, we plan to take these things on, because we have to keep this going. It can't be once every 6 months we get together and talk about these things. So finally, and thanks for your patience and your tenacity bearing with us to the end of the day, is over to you. You now are our panel. The microphones are all gone from up here. They're within the room, and looking to kind of follow up on the idea of there's a room full of case studies here. You've all got experience. You've all got ideas, and hoping that following on that kind of template, that a number of you are willing to stand up and talk about who you are, which areas you're involved with, whether it's existing hospital efficiency, it's decarbonization planning or new hospital development, and talk about what have you heard today, what insights have you picked up, what do you think you'd like to follow up with, and if you're brave enough to throw it out there, let's see who else in the room says, that sounds like a good idea to me, I'd like to be part of that. So, biggest insights from today, the highest impact change you can make tomorrow. And I'm throwing this out there to now for anybody, let us know your thoughts, and we will take notes of this, and we will write these notes up anonymously as to guidance to us, guidance to the other players, guidance to you, and guidance to government about this is what you need. This is where hospitals are looking for help to do this work. So we'll start with an uncomfortable silence, because that always gets people. Yes, Katie. Good job, by the way. You get a free drink at the end.
Great. Okay, so I've been a breathing healthcare practitioner for a long time, worked in hospitals across North America. And the place, although my background is in environmental science and I'm an environmentalist at my core, what I've come to have to learn in practice is the human dimensions of sustainability. And that often gets referred to as behavior. And we heard it a lot here today, over and over again, around collaboration, people, engagement, awareness, training. To me, these are all things that are tied directly to the people that are responsible for the decision-making, maintenance, purchasing of all of these things that are going to get us to decarbonization, hopefully. So what I want to say is that we say it quickly in a sentence when we're then quickly jump to the financial case, the business case, the technology potential, talking to the CEO, getting board endorsement, finding the frontline people. And we don't actually really spend enough time, in my opinion, on the conditions, circumstances, and context in which people are operating. Behavior follows environment. People react to the environment they're in. And at work, there's a lot that's going on that's well beyond our control. And so the time that it's going to take to understand the qualitative nature of how people are operating within their hospitals to achieve these very ambitious and much needed process and technology, policy, legislative changes misses the key element of understanding the people. And we're not talking about one by one by one. I think we heard the triple score today, and there's also the multi-solving, there's co-benefits, multiple benefits, non-energy benefits. We've been talking about all these like sprinkly things around the main crux of the topic for a long, long time, except when it comes to people, because people are inherently unpredictable. We can't model people. They've tried, believe me. Engineers have tried to model people, and we cannot do it. And so what does that ask us to do? It asks us to bring in new expertise. It asks us to bring in new expertise that understands people and the dynamics of people in groups, especially at work. And so we're talking about anthropology, we're talking about sociology, we're talking about behavioral science, we're talking about expertise that can fundamentally help to bring the context, circumstances, and environmental choices that people are working within to help establish and then far surpass anything that we could possibly be talking about here today. And I don't see where there's an appetite or an avenue or a pathway to be able to do that. I haven't seen it much in my healthcare career. And I would really, really encourage anybody that is talking about energy, that is talking about decarbonization, climate preparedness, and all of the other environmental issues that actually still exist, to seriously consider how we are going to account for, include, and then design people into our realities, as opposed to assuming that they will be predictable and function as we had always hoped. So this is stuff that I do day to day. I've been helping hospitals and other large institutional sectors to think about this in a different way. It does require a mindset shift. And so I'd really love to hear what others think about that and where there might be some spark or nugget that's already happening within your facilities.
Mr. Hardy.
I'm so happy you brought that up. Truth is, just last week I gave a presentation on team development at a conference, and I thought it was kind of the odd duck out because we're usually talking about Indigenous engagement, and we're talking about climate change. We're talking about all these things, and I gave a presentation on we don't spend a lot of time actually looking at the team development. And who's on your team, because if you have everybody that thinks the same way, you're never going to get to move the needle from that perspective. And part of that too is when our team, and we try to get a wide range, when we were going to engage with Project Co on the other side, we actually did a bunch of team learning about crucial conversations and influence, because we realized in a transactional relationship, we actually don't have power. Power doesn't sit normally in these reactions, right? So we actually talked about how do we influence decision making. And one of the things that we talked about was how important this is. If the other team on the other side doesn't believe that we are running into our our climate crisis, they're not going to, and they're only looking at incentives. That's not going to happen. So we have to grow that. And then that also brings up partnerships in these relationships. I don't think we do a very good job in doing this. And I'll say that because I'm an architect. I went through school. I think we're doing a better job now with the students, but I'm in a leadership position. I didn't have one course on engagement, but somehow I was supposed to understand everything my client wanted, but we didn't learn how to properly engage. So I just want to stress how that's an excellent thing. And I think that is the next thing we have to focus on to achieve these goals, because we can talk all we want about how we all agree that we need to do this. And then to your point, and then when we have to actually do it together, we don't do it effectively. Either we're all divergent or we're thinking exactly the same way. So I just want to stress that next year you should actually have a session on team building. Sorry.
So it's all coming together, Cliff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. The question is to Janet and Cliff and the sister hospital about the performance contract PESCO project. So if a facility already done most of the low-hanging fruit and your project cost effectiveness changed from $250 per steel to increase to $2,500. And for this type of project, do you still think it makes sense that performance contract is a appropriate business model? And if yes, enter this kind of a contract, what are some common pitfall lesson learned?
The question was to Janet.
I think the standard contracts are need to go by the wayside. I think what we talked about through the whole panel, through the whole day, is how we need to collaborate better, and we have to manage risk and share the risk. So I think a lot of these standard contracts whereby they were put in place and they're there for 25 years, they don't work for these types of procurements or these types of projects anymore. So they're long-term projects that last for many, many years. They need to ebb and flow. They need to be a live contract. How we do that, I don't necessarily have the answer to that right now, but I think that it's really, really important that we get away from the idea that it's a piece of paper that thou shalt be in effect for 25 years. I don't think practical anymore. I think, as we talked about, targets are there, and we need to have targets as to support the goal and where we're going. But I think what the service providers and the hospitals have to be able to manage and be flexible with the documents and the contracts that they're writing.
So the finance team always look into net present value, right? But but now the net present value becomes negative present value, and then accounting becomes the issue how you pay your performance contractor partner based on the saving. Not sure if anyone have done this before. Because the benefits are there. You got the social benefit. You got what is sustainability benefit, but you just don't have finance return. So I'm not sure if this is still some potential candidate for performance contract.
I think Cameron Deep wanted to talk to you for that.
Couple of thoughts on that. One of the things you mentioned, if you achieved the low-hanging fruits, so one of the things will happen with that. So when you look at the green healthcare benchmarking chart, whichever facility achieved the low-hanging fruits, you're looking at 30% reduction. You should be already in the top quartile targets or top quartiles. You're trying to be there. So if you're already there, yes, you've achieved significant improvement, made a significant improvements in your facility by yourself. Now, your question about whether the next phase of projects, whether they make sense for a P3 contract or not, it's similar to as like where have you started, what you have achieved as a part of the project. Like, so once you've done the low hanging fruit, does that bring you from bottom of the list to the median, or does it takes you from median to top quartile? But if you're already at the top quartile and now you have to think, when you're at the top quartile, you're looking at decarbonization strategies because you already achieved the decommissioning savings. Now you're looking at fundamental improvements in the systems, which again, it becomes generally a bigger capital projects. So there is an appetite for, I think, a P3 sort of level of the contracts, because now you're looking at fundamentally changing your source of energy in your system. So to your point, yes, your paybacks on the systems will change, but then the matrix is not just a payback at that time. You're looking at going beyond that matrix of paybacks. You're now looking at GHG emission reductions as a part of your overall capital plans and an overall plan of the facility. So this is, now you're going from 2030 to 2040 and 2050 targets.
Mike, could I pick on you? Like Rohan, what have you heard today? How well does this conversation mirror what's happening in New York? And share some of those.
I mean, I have an inherent bias against PCs just for the history. And we've had a couple of discussions last night and today about how do we better formulate a contract that does have that risk management element.
Yep.
Is long-term, but not too long-term, because, you know, it's tough to foresee a 30 year. To use the example about the automobile, as I think Cliff had given before. So what's the right duration? What's the right appetite for risk? Now, one thing, though, that I think is extremely helpful right now is we're starting to bake in our forecasts. Steam in New York City, 15% per year for the next 3 years. Gas and electric are also going up substantially. If you start to bake in $268 a ton, projects that were 10-year paybacks are now 4-year paybacks. So how do we bring that future forecast into a contract right now? Because I think then you have a lot more gain share.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we're saving a lot of carbon right there. It brings projects that weren't at all viable right in front and center.
So you mentioned a bias against performance contract. How do you see this risk sharing working best?
I guess the conventional was and maybe it was ignorance on the part of facility managers, but you have somebody who could be pretty savvy, go in and identify specific opportunities that are tough to measure and verify. So I think it needs to be more open and transparent, because again, I think, I'm speaking to a bias of a PC 15 years ago.
Yep.
So how do we eliminate that through more openness, more transparency, and construct that concrete with the forecast? And if the forecast is not that we're at 30 cents a kWh in 30, which is what we're estimating, but then we at least can normalize it, similar to weather normalization, just a financial normalization.
Yeah. Can we pass the baton to Craig again? Reflections on the day, and what, if anything, was an important insight, and how you're going to use that in Manitoba. And Grace, if I may, I'd like again to pick on you in a moment. I think I'd love to hear Humber River. Now you're kind of what Amardeep was saying. Now you're at the top quartile. What next? What consumes your organization's head? So, but we'll come back to that after we've spoken to Craig, if we may.
Yeah, I think, coming away from any of these sessions, the best is the connection and the learning from each other. And we said it multiple ways. Can we share our sustainability strategic plan? One might be a 1-pager, one might be a 75-pager, and everybody may be in awe of the 1-pager, going, geez, that's really what we need. Simple, maybe more beautiful, maybe more deliverable. Getting that engagement with everybody in the organization, procurement, our executive, our, in Canadian healthcare, getting up into the Ministry of Health and into these boards that, depending on where you are, sometimes those boards are just appointees of the current government, and sometimes they're actually strong representatives of the community. What makes them tick? How am I going to get that connection with them and get them some insight in it? And I'm encouraged by the Accreditation Canada documents that now in the leadership section have, what is your environmental sustainability plan? So yes, we've got something that somebody's going to get held accountable for, not just the whatever department got tagged with sustainability, but that it actually has to have something up there. So how do we build all of this together and connect it? We've heard this one, from the boiler room to the boardroom. And we rarely get to the boardroom or, to that side. So, but how do we bring it? Because we have these requirements, and I like what Mike just said, like, if we're basing something on this factor, whether it's our federal carbon charge or our utilities, we have to pick something. As I said before, I'm not ready to jump into the flash in the pan, always the latest technology. So I'm a little more risk adverse, but how do we work together? How do we look at the financial risk as well? Where will the federal carbon charge be in whatever it is, 28 months from now, after we have another federal election? Mm-hmm. What will that look like? And has that changed things? So again, so much to take away. I guess what I take away is, I don't know much, but I know a lot of people who know a lot. And, that's where, the emails, the LinkedIn, the connection is just key to keep this going, because the pace of what we're doing, or the pace of everything that is being done, none of us can keep up with the whole gamut. So leveraging that.
Love it. Grace, life at the top.
So I think our challenge is that we have a contract. Hear me? I think our performance and our contract, I think these are two parallel streams, and one is to stick with what the contract provision is, but at the same time, work collaboratively in terms of improving the operation and find ways to better the performance. I think sometimes, people are confusing the actual performance and the contract administration. And I think the challenge is, like, how do we find a better way to collaborate and find more opportunities of improvement.
And do you think there's still further room to improve at Humber River? Is that the psyche?
Yes, I think, in terms of operation, there are many areas that we can collaborate.
And would your facility manager provider, they agree with you? Is that a good collaboration? How does that work under the project agreement?
I think we're still trying to find new opportunities. Right now, contract is, going on its own course, but I do find that communication in terms of day-to-day operation, and that will, if we can do better than that, that will really help.
Kyle, may I turn to you as, again, you got so much stuff coming up. What have you heard today that might help?
Actually, my brain is spinning with all the things to do and to push forward. I think it was a lot more positive the last time I was here. But I'm also want to be more realistic because we're seeing, like 2030, and we're talking about 2030 a couple of years ago, and it seems so far away.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, it's here. And I see, we wouldn't be sitting here. All these people right now wouldn't be sitting here if we're all like-minded, that we want to make a change happen. I think we're stuck. I love the fact that Cliff and John brought up, and yourself, organizing. I think the challenge of healthcare is just the way our clinical teams are. Great at triaging, suck at organizing. I think we all saw it when we saw COVID hit, right? I think almost every single one of our organizations came together like that and pulled together incredible plans, worked together, silos were taken down. But once the world kind of got back to where it was, now trying to organize again is very difficult. Right? We triage, we wait for the mass emergency. So now it's really about how do we organize and prepare ourselves. So with that being said, I think it's really looking at the fact that someone's talking about human nature, I guess, facilities and all that stuff. And it's kind of like, here's the reality. This is a financial problem. It's the finances are going to solve the problem. We got to find a way to kind of say, how do we get the money to do this? And because if these bills come due, let's just be honest, this is what we are as human beings. We're consumers. We have consumed without any cost. And now this cohort, this generation now is trying to figure out a way how to pay the visa bill that showed up, right? And now we're all going around saying, hey, we need money to fix these problems. And everyone's kind of going, and that's what's happened with our bosses. That's what happened with the poor CFOs. We're like, we need money to do these retrofits. We need to change to build these way more energy efficient buildings. But what does that give me here? But it's like, no, you've spent already. And I think that's the discussions now that we have to have, the really hard discussions with our clinical teams as they want their MRIs, as they want all the equipment that they want. It's saying, listen, you also have to give back to the facility. I know it sucks that's you, but the person who sat in your chair 20, 30 years ago didn't pay that cost. Unfortunately, you have to, because if you don't, we know what the outcome is. And so that's the next discussions that we as facilities leaders have to have and figure out, is it a financial model? Is it a tax? I mean, I brought my team in and they did some amazing jobs when we review all the different projects. And now sustainability has a chair at the table to evaluate the capital projects, the equipment, all that stuff to give a voice, So I think something like that's going. But I think to get there, we organize together and figure out what models can we put forward across every hospital within Ontario and with our peers, maybe in the States, that can use that as well. But I think it is something that we have to consider, that the financial component is it. We're all sitting there saying, someone's got to give us the money. We're looking at government's kind of saying, maybe, give me a plan. Okay, organize a plan, bring it to government. But also internally, we have to realize that someone has to give up something in order for us to fix this.
So you're looking at all, SickKids is looking at all capital projects side by side? An MRI versus a heat recovery chiller, whatever.
We bring them forward, yeah. And that's really what I'm pushing forward. And we actually have partnered with our financial partners to look at other models are changing how we evaluated our corporate projects. So our capital projects and all our projects across the board, IRC, infrastructure renewal, facility renewal, capital, all those are being reevaluated now. Because there's only so much money in the pot. That's the reality. There's only so much money, and all we're doing is dividing up that money to certain groups, and those with the loudest voices get the most money, right? Those with the most influence get the most money, as you talked about, Cliff, right? Influence. Well, it's about endorsement to me. That's what I'm looking at. My team has helped me realize, right? It's about going there and getting buy-in, getting the endorsement of your peers, seeing that, hey, we're at the table here, there's only so much that we can divvy up. If you get this year, then so-and-so gets it the next year, and I need to get a piece of that as well. Why? Because we're all in together to keep the hospital there to service the community. Ultimately, that's what this is all about, right? It's that strategy of sharing into that, right? And we call it pain, but it's not pain. It's you have gotten, right? The environment has not. We've gotten because we've consumed. So that's what we're looking at right now. But it's been small. We're trying to figure out now new ways of getting bigger steps. Because the original was just getting to the table to be part of that evaluation. The next one we're talking about right now with our finance team is really how do we get from a financial standpoint to get that money back? Something like a green revolving fund. Right? We save the money. It doesn't go back into the clinical side. It comes back to the facility side.
Investment plan. Last question is, you characterize it as a financial problem. Is it a financial problem or an organizational and management problem to get to where we need to go? The biggest progress on those 3 charts we looked at, is it financial issue or is it organizational issue?
I think, it's both. But then in the day, finance has driven it, right? The money of investment, and understand that investment and where does that investment go, and ultimately the organization makes those calls, right? To go from that standpoint. But right now, the solution, the solution is a financial solution because the technologies exist. Someone talked about what's happened in Japan, right? Everywhere we know what our counterparts in Europe are doing, right? So I think the technology, the know-how with this room, it's there. It's the financial component to make sure those things happen. And then, of course, organizing, which is the biggest part.
Okay, appreciate that. Yes.
Hello, thank you. First of all, just thank you all for the conversation. I'm new to the greening healthcare space. I attended a webinar earlier this year and thought I have to go to this conference. So I'm very glad to be here. My name is Zachary Wells. I think one thing that is also really unique about this space and this community is that it is serving society in a way that no other portion of the built environment can really claim credit to, and that it's healing society. And I think part of what's important there is the fact that there's a lot of research about the health impacts that emissions have, and there's really a moral responsibility in the healthcare space to do no harm, to reduce emissions from a societal health perspective. And I think that is a really kind of crucial crux that helps to come back to, I think, the analogy of the day, achieve a triple word score here. Because with that in mind, I think, Mike, to your point, we can parlay social costs of carbon that are out there. I know the United States federal government has published dollar value per ton of reduced carbon emissions, and I think that really adds value in this space uniquely that we can use when we want to demonstrate value for improvements and to argue for sustainable development in the healthcare space. So I just wanted to emphasize a couple of dots that I connected while we were having this conversation here. In the moral responsibility to do no harm and to heal society that we're all kind of implicated and involved in by being in this room and talking about what we're talking about, and its connection with the quantifiable costs of carbon that are getting published. I'm here from New York. I'm not sure if we have similar metrics in Canada, but maybe someone else can speak to that. But anyway, I wanted to kind of connect those dots here and thank everyone again for the discussion today.
Very happy to have you here. Other thoughts?
Thank you. I just want to bring this idea that Ian, we talked about the continuous improvement and the changes that might happen. I mean, political change, maybe the government changes. Or one more change that we might see from next year is the mission factor in Ontario, for example. So from 100 now it's going to be 500. So what is the plan and how the hospital is going to continue? I mean, some P3 contracts, they are good because those contracts are already established. They have a metric, they have a performance, and they have to keep that one. So the project code, for example, cannot go away from it. But what about the other hospitals? What about these great things that you are doing right now? So what about those kind of continuous improvements? So what is the plan right now, actually?
Yeah, the idea we got to have a plan, I think. Who could say that's a bad idea? But how do you plan with the amount of uncertainty that's playing around with us right now? As you say, we have no idea what the price of carbon will be. We have no idea what the price of electricity will be. We don't know what the policy framework from the government is going to be. And any thoughts? There's a number of hospitals we haven't heard from yet. How do you plan through uncertainty? Hey, Cliff.
One of the things is a complex problem.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing was recognize all the players. So many of you have heard me talk about the roadmap that we did when we created the roadmap for the South Niagara project. And it was 18 different work streams that we had a resource. And that at the beginning, those work streams were linear across 5 stages to get us to occupancy. But then when we started to connect the dots, we realized somebody's work stream with this deliverable needed a piece of information from this work stream. And this work stream had to bring it down to this one and back. And that could go with energy. We could use that as an example. It ties into team development because each one of those work streams needs an expertise and it has to be knowledgeable about it for planning, design, or operational readiness, or energy, facilities management. And so they had to collaborate across that team. And to your point, being an expert, just like this happens every year, somebody brings up a piece of information that has changed the equation. And if you're all in the same room, you go, okay, we have to change that. This is important. So a plan is not to be put on the shelf. A plan is to be executed, and it requires people to collaborate. It requires to be aware of what's happening. So again, team development. Are the right people here from your team to be listening to this? Because it's your responsibility to go back and ensure that they understand what's actually happening. So education, and then my pet peeve is you don't hear about the fact is like going to a conference is an expense. Well, it's more than an expense. It's actually going to harm you if your team isn't listening to this and taking it forward. Long story short, recognizing that it's a complex problem, it's a team problem, it means multiple factors. You have to collaborate and you have to constantly update it. You have to constantly be working together on this one because it does change. Otherwise, how are we going to solve this problem? Mm-hmm. Right? And we can't be isolated. We each have to kind of go out now into our own organizations and bring back that message. We also have to go to other conferences that are focused on something else and take away from them, but bring this message. So I think it is solvable. I think it just realizes that that plan is not the traditional Gantt chart. That plan is something much more complex. It involves teams, it involves collaboration and relationships. And at one point, and I'll use Project or Alistan, they become part of the team. They're no longer Project Code. They're no longer the transaction, part. They are part of this team, and we had to write, we wrote things into our contract about partnering, like real partnering, right? And what that really means and how we solve problems. We actually put together, for the first time I've ever seen, the administrative chart of what it looks like to do a P3 project in Ontario and the number of committees that we have to do and the roles and responsibilities. So those are all things that we need to get a handle on so that we can collaborate and solve that problem. I promise not to put my hand up again.
I think I'll make one last call and then any last thoughts people want to share with each other while we still have you? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Geeta. I'm from Ecosystem. Just collective thoughts on what I've heard here today. One of the things, collaboration came out as a topic in from multiple different people and across different topics. So it's kind of obvious for me that for these kind of projects, collaboration is not a nice to have, but it's a must have component in all of our projects. And we see that more and more in all of our projects, and it's a must-have component for infrastructure renewal projects. The second thing I wanted to talk about, and it was also nice to see here in the panel, the focus on outcomes. And somewhere I thought when we spoke about outcomes, we were very focused on performance parameters alone, like GHG reduction or energy savings. But outcomes, I think, is, or at least from where I see it, it's broader than just energy performance parameters. For a healthcare institution, outcomes could be patient comfort. Outcomes could be uninterrupted operations in certain areas of institution. And how are those broader outcomes related to your projects, and how do we connect the dots of outcomes to project outcomes, business outcomes to project outcomes? I think it's a good question to ask, and I think the answer only comes with a lot of stakeholder engagement. We see that I'm a business development manager, so we see that in talking to various folks in a business, a lot of engagement and connection of dots happen while we talk. And I guess the last but not the least, I think I also wanted to shed light on the contractual obligation. I think someone from the US there just said, how do we frame the contract in such a way that you tie the outcomes to the, you're contractually obligated to deliver on those outcomes. So I think those were kind of the high level thoughts that I got together at the end of the session.
It's very helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Let me then do the best I can to for what I've learned from today, and this is around mind changing. The whole discussion around relationships versus transactions for me was kind of profound. If we're going to work together for the next 30 years to help save the world from the perils of climate change, do we start with paint shop? I find that really intriguing. So that whole conversation about what is the nature of those working relationships, I think there's clarity around collaboration, there's clarity around it's a multiple year relationship. We can't bring people in and people out and hope to build a relationship. That's kind of sleeping around. That's not going to get us to where we need to go. So that issue of what's the nature of these new forms, better forms of service delivery. I think thanks for the comment about outcomes. I hope, I haven't changed my mind on the fact, I think there's clarity around outcomes, that from here on in, starting tomorrow, every one of the hospitals in this room will be working their way up those energy efficiency charts. There's no more backsliding, no more 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. And if you haven't got sufficiently good information systems right now to prevent that happening, that you get early feedback, within a couple of months, whoops, gas use or electricity use is going in the wrong direction. You can jump on it, you can deal with it, you can train your staff. So no more backsliding and implementing improvements. And if we haven't got the funding immediately, we got recommissioning funding available from the IES, so we can run what we've got better until we get money to improve what we got. So running it right, in many cases, delivers more savings, more reductions, more improvements than buying new technology, which has to be embraced and brought in. So the idea of relationships, the outcomes are clear. I'd love to hear, and I hope to stay in touch with all of you, I'd love to hear from new project development teams saying, we are absolutely going to make sure that our hospital hits the top, the top end of that chart, and that top group from day one, that we've listened to each other. This idea of organizing for success, I love that idea, and part of that is new hospital performance. What do you need to know from other teams? All the hospitals are willing to share. What can we learn from the ones that worked out well? What can we learn from the ones that didn't work out so well? So we hit the nail on the head every time, right? And that every hospital, a year from now, 2 years from now, has a low carbon plan, a vision of what the hospital needs to look like 10 years from now, and that you've aligned that with your capital planning. That, yeah, we are replacing the air-cooled cooling unit on the morgue. And we understand it has to be a water-cooled unit, and it's got to be connected to the chilled water system, and that we got to plan for the future to be able to recover that heat and reuse it. So those kind of things. So if we get moving up the chart, avoiding increases, new hospitals, we get it right the first time. We're absolutely going to make sure we do that. We've learned from everybody, and we know how to get it right, and we're going to make sure it happens, and we've got low carbon plans in place. Those are the outcomes. I don't think there's any dispute on that. How we get there is still a little mystifying, I think. But if we all got a better idea for committing to those outcomes and making it happen, that is great. As I say, our intention with the morning session about managing change and with this one is to put together a bit of what did we learn, and try to represent that in a way that will make sense to you. We'll put that online. We'll present that to the parties that are in this room, the government players, the utility players, everybody who can help us move forward, help us move in the right direction. So we'll commit to making that happen. And with those thoughts in mind, unless there's any further comments people would like to make. And again, thank you for staying the course too. It's been a long day for everybody. But we talked about knowing what to do. We talked about knowing how to get it done. You'll get the slide deck. Keep those thoughts in place, and please stay in touch. I'm Ian Jarvis, the Executive Director of Climate Challenge Network. You met my colleague Heather Bell at the back, who's there to talk about getting involved in the work that we're doing. Mike Pagel, who runs the program and takes good care of us, and Amandeep, both my friends are in the corner there. Stay in touch. Every success with what you're doing. I don't think it could ever matter more. And I agree with Kyle completely. It's not quite as upbeat a program. It was not intended to be. 2030 is coming. We can't escape it, and we truly are running out of time. Thank you all for your time. The bar will be open in a few minutes, and if you can, do stay on and have those informal conversations that often can be the most valuable part of the whole day. Thank you all, and have a great evening.